A dusty Alabama classroom. A white teacher smirks as he writes an uncrackable equation on the board. Then mocks the only black kid in the room. "Sit down, Zion. This isn't for you." But Zion stands, silent, calm, and starts solving what even seniors failed. As his chalk scratches the board, the class gasps. The teacher's face drains white, because what Zion just solved shouldn't have been possible. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. Weldon County Middle School didn't look like a place where genius could grow. Sitting at the edge of a forgotten road in rural Alabama, the school looked like time had given up on it. The walls were cracked, the ceiling sagged, and the playground grass was patchy with dry, reddish dirt poking through. For the kids who walked its halls, ambition wasn't nurtured, it was quietly erased. 12-year-old Zion Walker sat in the back of room 3B, a math classroom that doubled as a daily battlefield. He was quiet, observant, and always thinking. His worn-out sneakers barely touched the floor, and his fingers constantly tapped out patterns on his desk, rhythms of logic and calculation only he could hear. He was the kind of child who never raised his hand, not because he didn't know the answer, but because he had learned that answers when they came from him brought tension, not praise. Zion's father, Leonard Walker, was a soybean farmer. A proud, sun-scarred man, whose hands told the story of generations tied to land that never quite gave back enough. And in Weldon County, being the son of a black farmer meant you started school already wearing a label: dirt poor, slow, just like his daddy. Zion had heard it all before, but he never repeated it. He buried it in silence. Mr. Harlan Crane had made sure of that. Crane, the school's long-revered math teacher, was what locals called old school. To the school board, he was a brilliant educator. To parents, especially the white ones, he was the last of a dying breed. Disciplined, traditional, and not afraid to tell it like it is. But to students like Zion, Crane was something else entirely. He carried the kind of racism that didn't need slurs or shouts. It lived in his tone, in his eyebrow raises, in the dismissals disguised as correction. Every time Zion spoke up, Crane found a way to tear it down. "That's not quite right, but close enough for you," Crane once said, without looking up. Zion didn't respond. He never did. But something inside him shifted each time. Tightened, hardened, grew quieter. Other students noticed. Especially the ones at the front. The ones Crane called the thinkers. Sarah Jane Witherspoon, blonde, always smiling, always praised. Malik Gray, one of the only other black kids in the class, sat in the second row, careful not to speak unless directly called. He'd learned fast that attention from Crane was a double-edged sword. One cold Tuesday morning in February, something changed. Crane stood at the board with a smug sort of energy, the kind he only displayed when he was about to humiliate someone. He wiped the board clean and said, "Let's see who's really paying attention today." He began scribbling an equation, long, winding, and cruel in its complexity. It wasn't from the syllabus. It wasn't even from the state standards. It was advanced calculus, far beyond middle school level. Zion's eyes tracked every number. Crane stepped back from the board and turned slowly to face the class. "Anyone?" he asked, his voice clipped, daring. Sarah Jane bit her lip. Malik didn't even look up. Crane waited. "This problem stumped my high schoolers," he said. "Anyone think they're special enough to try?" His eyes drifted toward the back row. Zion didn't blink. There was a long pause, heavy like a storm before it breaks. Then Zion stood up. He didn't speak. He just walked toward the front, the sound of his footsteps soft against the floor. Every student turned to watch, a few stifling laughter. Crane raised an eyebrow, his smirk deepening. "You're welcome to try," he said, stepping aside, "but don't get upset when you realize you're in over your head." Zion didn't respond. He picked up the chalk with steady hands. It was the first time anyone had seen him at the front of the room. The board towered over him, but his mind moved faster than his nerves. He began writing symbols, steps, reversals, substitutions, lines of logic unfolding like poetry. The class fell silent. Crane crossed his arms, his smile fading. Zion didn't rush. He took the time to check each line, erasing one part, adjusting another. His focus was surgical. The room had become a vacuum. Even Sarah Jane leaned forward in her seat. 10 minutes passed, then 15, and then Zion stepped back. The equation was complete. He turned around and walked back to his seat, eyes still calm, never meeting Crane's. The silence was deafening. Crane stared at the board. He didn't say a word. No one moved. And that's when Malik whispered, barely audible, "I think he got it right." Crane's jaw tightened. Zion sat down and looked out the window, back to tapping his quiet rhythm. And in that moment, something fundamental shifted in room 3B. Not just in how the students saw Zion, but in how the power in that classroom tilted. But Zion didn't smile. He knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. One day, Mr. Crane writes an uncrackable problem on the board, and Zion doesn't flinch. The next morning, Weldon County's sky hung gray and heavy, as though the clouds themselves were listening. The classroom was colder than usual, not from the weather but from the tension that had started to live there since Zion's quiet display of brilliance. Mr. Crane hadn't said a word about what happened the day before. He'd ignored it, moving through lessons as if nothing unusual had occurred. But his silence was loaded, like a predator waiting for the perfect time to strike. Zion sat in the same seat, back row, left corner. He wasn't afraid, but he wasn't comfortable either. Every move he made now seemed to draw whispers. A few kids stole glances at him. Others just stared openly, half curious, half jealous. Sarah Jane Witherspoon had tried to catch his eye earlier, but Zion didn't look up. He knew what was coming. When the bell rang, Crane walked in slowly, a rolled-up sheet of paper in his hand. He didn't greet the class, didn't open the textbook. Instead, he went straight to the chalkboard. "Yesterday," he began, his voice smooth but sharp around the edges, "we witnessed something unusual." The class shifted in their seats. Malik looked down, pretending to fix his pencil. Crane kept going. "A student, one who's not exactly known for excelling in my class, attempted a rather difficult equation." He paused, glancing toward Zion. "Now I believe in giving everyone a fair chance, but I also believe in verifying results. After all, truth is the foundation of learning." He turned to the board and started writing. Symbols sprawled across the black surface, growing more complex with each stroke of chalk. At first the class followed along, but soon the equations outpaced their understanding. It wasn't algebra, it wasn't geometry, it was something far beyond that. Derivatives, limits, integrals, all twisting into a mathematical labyrinth that didn't belong in a middle school. "This," Crane said, stepping back, "is a problem most high school seniors fail to solve correctly. It's known in collegiate circles for testing comprehension and intuition. Now, let's see." His eyes locked on Zion. "If our prodigy can enlighten us again." A quiet chuckle spread through the room. Not loud, not cruel, just the kind of laughter that people use when they expect to watch someone fall. Zion looked up. His palms were slightly sweaty, but his mind wasn't panicked. Numbers, patterns, they weren't enemies to him. They spoke a language that made sense when people didn't. He slowly stood. Crane watched, expression unreadable, as Zion made his way to the front. "You don't have to do this," Malik whispered under his breath. But Zion kept walking. He stopped in front of the board. The problem towered over him, like a riddle written by arrogance. He studied it quietly, his lips moving as he traced each line, each fraction, each curve of Crane's trap. The room went silent, except for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. "Take your time," Crane said, mockingly. "We wouldn't want you to guess." Zion picked up the chalk. His hand trembled, just slightly. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing on his shoulders. The doubt, the whispers, the expectation that he would fail. But beneath all of it, there was something else, a spark of defiance. He began to write. At first his steps were slow and careful, methodical. The chalk squeaked softly as he wrote fractions and symbols, erasing here, rewriting there. The class leaned forward. Even Sarah Jane's phone, halfway pulled out for a secret picture, froze midair. Zion's logic unfolded like music. Each symbol an unseen note, each movement part of an invisible rhythm. He wasn't copying something he'd seen online. He wasn't recalling formulas from a textbook. He was thinking, creating. For every line he wrote, Mr. Crane's expression tightened. He had expected fumbling. He had expected confusion. But what he was seeing was precision, raw, natural, undeniable.
"Where did you learn that step?"
Crane's voice cut through the silence. Zion paused, glancing back. "It just makes sense," he said softly. The class shifted again. It wasn't arrogance. It was truth. That quiet kind of truth that unnerves people, who've built their pride on superiority. Crane took a step closer, his jaw tight. You're making assumptions. That method doesn't apply here. Zion nodded slightly and kept writing. It does if you look at it differently. A soft murmur ran through the students. Sarah Jane's pencil dropped to the floor. Malik's eyes widened. Zion moved faster now, connecting the parts that had seemed impossible moments before. He was no longer shaking. His handwriting flowed with confidence. His breathing steady. It was like watching someone walk through a storm and remain untouched. When he reached the final step, he hesitated. He could feel the weight of Crane's stare burning into his back, but he didn't stop. He underlined the answer, set the chalk down, and stepped away. For a moment there was nothing, just the quiet hum of disbelief. Then Sarah Jane whispered, "He got it." Malik nodded, his mouth slightly open. That's right. I think that's actually right." Crane didn't move. His eyes darted across the board, scanning, hunting for an error that wasn't there. His face drained of color. "This problem," he said finally, voice cracking slightly, "wasn't on any of your materials. You couldn't have—" "I didn't cheat," Zion said, his voice low but steady. Crane's hands clenched at his sides. "Then where did you learn this? Tell the class how you did it." "I just saw it." It wasn't defiance. It was innocence. But in that simplicity there was something powerful, something that made Crane's control over the room begin to fracture. The students exchanged glances. Some were amazed, some confused, and a few, especially the ones who had laughed before, looked uncomfortable. Crane turned to the board again, erasing one section angrily, as though the problem itself had betrayed him. "No," he muttered. "This can't be right. You must have memorized it. You must have found it online." Zion didn't respond. He simply stood there, small against the enormity of the board, his gaze calm and distant. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Crane said sharply, turning back. "You think this is some sort of performance?" Zion shook his head. "No, sir. You asked if anyone could try." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Every student in that room understood what they were watching. It wasn't just a math test. It was something deeper, a challenge to the unspoken rules of who was supposed to be smart, who was supposed to lead, who was supposed to fail. Crane's authority had been questioned in front of 30 witnesses. He forced a tight smile. "We'll see about that," he said coldly. Class dismissed. The bell hadn't even rung yet, but no one moved until he waved his hand. Zion turned back toward his seat, his heart pounding. He didn't feel victorious. He felt exposed. As he sat down, Malik whispered, "You killed that man. That was—" Zion shook his head. "He's not done." Crane remained at the board long after everyone left, staring at the faint outline of the equation, now half erased. His hand trembled as he set the chalk down. Because for the first time in his 20 years of teaching, he couldn't explain what had just happened. As Zion steps back from the chalkboard, the entire class gasps, including Crane. The sound of chalk still hung in the air long after Zion had finished. It lingered like smoke, curling around the stunned faces of his classmates. The board was filled with numbers, elegant and deliberate, the kind of work no one expected from a 12-year-old. Zion stood there, breathing shallowly, his fingers still dusted white. He didn't look triumphant. He looked careful, like someone who knew too much silence could be more dangerous than the wrong answer. Mr. Crane hadn't moved. He stared at the board as though trying to will it into being wrong. The room waited for him to speak, for validation, maybe even reluctant praise, but none came. Instead, he exhaled slowly, his lips tightening into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Well," he said at last, voice clipped, "that was interesting." A few kids exchanged confused looks. Interesting wasn't what you said when someone did the impossible. Crane stepped forward, tapping the board with the end of a ruler. "Except," he continued, "this problem isn't from our curriculum. It's not from any textbook used in this district. So tell me, Zion, where did you find it?" Zion blinked. "Find it?" Crane's tone sharpened. "Don't play dumb. This exact problem appears on a banned test prep website that was flagged last year. I know because I helped review it." Whispers flickered across the classroom. The excitement that had begun to build moments ago evaporated, replaced by suspicion. Malik looked between them, frozen, torn between disbelief and fear. Zion's heart thudded painfully in his chest. "I didn't—" "Didn't what?" Crane snapped, stepping closer. "Didn't memorize it? Didn't copy it down? You expect me to believe a farm boy who can barely keep up with grade-level algebra just cracked a problem that stumps seniors?" The words hit harder than any slap could. Zion's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. The silence stretched thin, brittle as glass. Crane let out a soft, almost theatrical sigh. Class, let's remember, integrity matters more than showmanship. What looks impressive doesn't always mean it's true. Sarah Jane raised her hand halfway, hesitant. But, he solved it, Mr. Crane. I saw. Crane cut her off. You think you saw, but when someone uses methods beyond their level, it's because they've seen the answer somewhere. This was never about talent. It was about deceit. The room went still again. And just like that, Zion's small moment of brilliance turned into a courtroom. Malik's pencil rolled off his desk and hit the floor with a soft clatter. He didn't pick it up. He wanted to say something. Anything. But he remembered what had happened last time a black kid argued with Crane. Detention. A phone call home. His mother's warning. Keep your head down, baby. Don't make them look your way too long. So Malik stayed quiet. Zion looked around, searching for someone, anyone, to meet his eyes. But the faces that had once glowed with awe were now blank, or worse, embarrassed. Not because of him, but because they didn't want to be seen agreeing with him. Crane straightened his tie, regaining his composure. Zion, you've put me in a difficult position. Academic dishonesty is a serious offense. I didn't cheat, Zion said quietly. Then explain how you solved it. I just worked through it. Crane let out a laugh, a cold, humorless sound that made Zion's skin crawl. Oh, you just worked through it. Do you hear yourself? Do you think intelligence appears from thin air? Genius requires foundation, training, discipline. You have none of that. The classroom was silent, except for the faint hum of the lights. Zion's throat felt dry. Maybe you don't think I should. Crane froze. What did you say? Zion hesitated, but the words had already escaped him. Maybe you don't think I'm supposed to be good at this. Crane's expression hardened. Enough. His voice cut through the air like a blade. Pack your things. The students stared, wide-eyed. Sarah Jane whispered. He didn't do anything. Sarah, I'll remind you who's in charge here. Crane snapped. No one disrupts my classroom with theatrics. Zion, you're going to the principal's office. Now. Zion didn't move at first. His pulse thudded in his ears. Every instinct told him to defend himself, to make them understand, but he knew it wouldn't matter. Not here. Not with Crane. He gathered his notebook and pencil slowly. The eraser was worn flat, the edges of the paper smudged gray with use. He'd spent hours every night with that notebook, filling it with numbers and ideas. Now it felt heavier than ever, like a piece of evidence in a trial he didn't agree to. As he reached the door, Crane said, "You'll need to hand that over." Zion turned. "My notebook?" "Yes. If you're innocent, there's no reason to hide your work." Zion clutched it tighter. "It's mine." Crane's voice grew icy. "Don't test me." For a long, unbearable moment, Zion didn't move. Then he walked forward and placed it on the desk. His fingers brushed the surface once before letting go. "Good," Crane said softly, almost with satisfaction. "We'll see what the principal thinks of your methods." As Zion stepped into the hallway, the door clicked shut behind him. The sound echoed like a verdict. Inside the classroom, Crane turned back to his students. "Let this be a lesson," he said. "Hard work is admirable, but shortcuts and deception, those never end well." No one responded. The air felt wrong now, thick with something unspoken. Sarah Jane's eyes were glassy. Malik sat rigid, staring at the empty chair in the back row. When the bell rang, no one rushed to leave. They filed out quietly, as though afraid of being next. In the principal's office, the fluorescent lights buzzed louder than usual. Principal Dana Ross, a woman in her 50s with polite eyes and a cautious smile, looked up from her desk as Zion entered. "Mr. Crane sent you?" she asked, though her tone already assumed guilt. Zion nodded, standing straight. "He says you may have replicated a problem from restricted material." She folded her hands. That's a serious allegation, Zion." He swallowed hard. "I didn't. I swear." Ross sighed. "Mr. Crane's a veteran teacher. If he believes there's cause, we have to investigate." Zion looked at the floor. "You'll see. I didn't do anything wrong." Ross hesitated, softening slightly. "Why don't you tell me exactly what happened?" He told her, carefully, every detail from the challenge on the board to the solution. She listened, nodding occasionally, but her eyes drifted to the clock more than once. When he finished, She said, "All right. I'll review the footage from the classroom camera. For now, go to the waiting area. Don't contact anyone until we speak again." Zion nodded. He walked out and sat on the cold metal chair outside her door, staring at the floor tiles. His reflection wavered in the waxed linoleum, distorted by the dull glow of overhead lights. He thought about his father, how he'd wake before sunrise, tend to the fields, and remind Zion every morning, "You don't have to be louder than them. You just have to be better." But what did better matter when no one wanted to see it? He heard voices inside the office. Crane's deep tone, Ross's polite responses. Their words were muffled, but one phrase cut through clearly: "We can't make exceptions for him." Zion's stomach turned. He stared at the hallway clock. Each tick felt like a hammer against his ribs. Then the office door opened. Crane brushed past without looking at him, his face rigid, almost triumphant. Ross appeared behind him. "Zion," she said gently, "you can go home for the day. We'll finish reviewing this by tomorrow." He nodded, not trusting his voice. As he left the office, he glanced at the small black camera in the corner of the hallway, its red light blinking steadily. The same kind of camera that faced the chalkboard. He walked out into the gray afternoon, the wind cool against his face, the echo of that classroom still burning in his ears. Zion is sent to the principal's office for academic dishonesty, but the school's surveillance footage tells a different story. The next morning arrived with a stillness that didn't feel like peace. It felt like something waiting to break. The Alabama sun cut across the soybean fields, in long golden streaks, brushing over the Walker family's modest farmhouse, a place that carried pride in every chipped brick and hand-fixed window. Inside, the house smelled faintly of brewed coffee and rain-soaked soil. Gloria Walker stood at the kitchen counter, her hands motionless around a chipped mug, eyes fixed on the old clock above the sink. Zion sat at the table, shoulders hunched, his untouched cereal turning soggy. His father, Leonard, adjusted his work gloves, preparing to head out to the fields, but even he moved slower than usual. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was heavy, like the pause before bad weather. Gloria finally spoke. "They called," she said quietly. "The principal wants us at the school at 9. Leonard grunted. "For what?" "They already embarrassed the boy enough." Gloria turned, her gaze fierce. "Because they think we'll just sit quiet. They think we'll nod, take whatever they say, and walk away like grateful." Zion stared at the floor. "Maybe it's not that bad." His mother's eyes softened. "Baby, when they start calling you a liar for being smart, it's always that bad." Principal Dana Ross's office smelled of lemon polish and paperwork. The walls were lined with certificates and faded school photos. Smiling students, proud teachers. But beneath all that order lay something else. The quiet machinery of self-protection. Ross greeted them with a practiced smile. The kind that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. and Mrs. Walker, thank you for coming in on such short notice. Please sit." Gloria didn't sit immediately. "We'd appreciate knowing what this is about." Ross clasped her hands. "Of course, I reviewed the classroom footage from yesterday. I wanted to be sure we understood what happened before moving forward." Zion's heart thudded. "You saw it?" "I did," Ross said. "And I can confirm you solved the problem on your own." Gloria's shoulders dropped with relief. "Then we can put this to rest. My son didn't cheat." Ross hesitated. "It's not that simple." Leonard frowned.
"What do you mean, not that simple? You saw it with your own eyes."
Ross's voice lowered. "Mr. Crane has a long history of excellence. He's been a pillar of this community for nearly 2 decades. Accusing him of misconduct or bias would create unnecessary division. We have to think about the school's reputation, the morale of the staff, the community perception." Gloria's relief curdled into fury. "You mean you saw the truth, and you're still choosing to protect him?" Ross looked pained, but not remorseful. "Mrs. Walker, please, I'm asking you as a mother, not an administrator. Let this go quietly. We'll remove the record of suspension, but we can't issue a public apology. It would invite scrutiny." Gloria leaned forward, her voice steady and sharp. "You think my son's dignity is a PR problem?" Ross folded her hands tighter. "This town isn't ready for that kind of attention." "Then maybe it needs it," Gloria shot back. Leonard placed a hand on her arm. "Glory." She turned on him. "No, not this time." Ross sighed, her patience thinning. "Look, Mr. Crane didn't mean harm. He's from an older generation. Sometimes things get misunderstood. He's offered to reinstate Zion quietly and continue mentoring him under supervision." Zion's head snapped up. "Mentoring me? His voice cracked with disbelief. He called me a cheater. Ross tried to smile. He regrets how it was handled. Gloria stood, her chair scraping hard against the tile. You don't get to rewrite what happened to make yourselves feel better. My son doesn't need his mentorship. He needs justice. The air grew brittle. Ross shifted her tone, dropping the warmth. Mrs. Walker, I'm trying to help you avoid escalation. This could follow Zion through school. Once certain labels appear in a student's file, they're hard to erase. Gloria's lips trembled, not from fear but from rage held too long. That's a threat. Ross looked away. It's a warning. Zion watched his mother, feeling both proud and terrified. Gloria was a woman who carried her words like armor, but he'd seen what happens when people like her stand too tall in places like Weldon County. She gathered her purse and turned to Leonard. We're done here. Mrs. Walker, please reconsider. Gloria spun back. You reconsider, Principal Ross. You have footage proving my son's innocence, and instead of clearing his name, you're protecting a man who humiliated a child, because that child had the audacity to be smarter than he was. Ross said nothing. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. When they left the office, Ross exhaled shakily, then reached for the phone. Her hands trembled slightly. Get me Superintendent Reeves, she said. We may have a situation brewing. Outside, the November wind had picked up, sweeping dust across the parking lot. Gloria walked fast, her heels striking the pavement like punctuation. Leonard followed, silent. Glory, he finally said. Maybe she's right. Maybe it's best to let it go. She stopped mid-step, turning to face him. Let it go, Leonard. They called our boy a liar. They tried to take what little pride he had left. If we let that stand, we're teaching him that the truth only matters when it's convenient for white folks. Leonard sighed. I just don't want to make things harder for him. Gloria's voice softened. It's already hard, baby. But pretending it ain't won't make it easier. Zion stood behind them, his backpack hanging loosely off one shoulder. He'd never seen his parents like this. His mother on fire, his father caught between fear and love. He finally spoke. I just wanted to learn. That's all. Gloria crouched down, touching his face. You did nothing wrong, Zion. Don't you let anyone make you believe otherwise. He nodded, eyes glassy. When they got home, Gloria didn't sit. She went straight to her small desk by the window and opened her old laptop. The Wi-Fi was slow, but determination was faster. She searched for civil rights lawyers in Birmingham, her fingers hitting the keys like drumbeats. Leonard stood behind her. You really gonna take this to lawyers? Gloria didn't look up. I'm not taking it to lawyers. I'm taking it to people who know what this looks like. Back at Weldon County Middle, Principal Ross sat alone in her office, rewatching the footage on her monitor. Zion's movements were calm, deliberate. There was no hesitation, no cheating, no trick. It was genius, plain and raw. She rubbed her temple, feeling a pang of guilt. Then a knock sounded at her door. Mr. Crane stepped in, his expression polite but watchful. You wanted to see me. Ross gestured for him to sit. I reviewed the footage. He folded his hands. And it's clear he solved it himself. Crane's jaw tightened. With respect, that's impossible. I've taught long enough to know when a student's bluffing. It's not a bluff. Crane leaned forward. If you release that footage, or contradict me publicly, you'll divide this entire school. You know how quickly these things spiral. Ross hesitated. Herlin, this isn't about politics. It's about a child's future.
And it's about our livelihoods.
Crane snapped. Mine, yours, the district's funding. Do you really want this place painted as racist in the news? Ross looked away, the weight of his words pressed against her chest. He stood to leave. Handle it quietly. That's what leaders do. When the door shut behind him, she closed her eyes. Her screen still showed Zion, mid-solution, chalk dust on his fingers. A moment of brilliance smothered by pride. She reached for the intercom, then stopped. Her finger hovered over the button before retreating. She couldn't bring herself to do the right thing, or the wrong one, so she did nothing at all. That night, Gloria sat on the porch with her phone pressed to her ear. The stars glowed faintly through the thin veil of humidity. A calm, confident voice answered. Birmingham Civil Rights Law Group. This is Attorney Caleb Hightower speaking.
Mr. Hightower.
She began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. My name's Gloria Walker. My son's been accused of cheating at school, but there's proof he didn't. They just don't want to admit it. There was a pause on the other end, then a shift in tone. Professional turning personal. Mrs. Walker, I've heard that story before, too many times. Gloria's grip tightened around the phone. Not like this, you haven't. Tell me everything, he said. She did. From beginning to end. When she finished, the line was quiet for several seconds. Finally, Hightower spoke again. You were right to call. Don't speak to the school again. We'll handle it. As she ended the call, Gloria stared out into the dark fields, the wind carrying the low hum of insects and the faint rustle of the soybean plants. Something had shifted. This wasn't just about Zion anymore. It was about every child who'd been told their light was too bright for the room they were born into. Gloria contacts a civil rights attorney in Birmingham, setting off a chain reaction the school never expected. News travels fastest when it carries a quiet explosion. For Zion Walker, the spark came as something he never intended. The classroom camera in room 3B of Weldon County Middle School had recorded his chalkboard performance, and someone uploaded the clip overnight. What happened next changed everything. In the pre-dawn hours, the video showed Zion's steady hand, the complex calculus problem, sprawled across the board, the tense faces of classmates, the inscrutable expression of his teacher, Harlan Crane. The caption, Farm Kid Solves Impossible Equation. Within minutes it had hundreds of views. Within an hour, thousands. The social media engine accelerated retweets, shares, comments. A hashtag emerged. Zion solved it. It trended across platforms, loud and insistent. On Facebook groups for Black parents, the video became a lightning rod. One father wrote, "This is exactly how our kids live. Brilliant, silenced, dismissed." A mother posted, "My daughter told us she's smart, but the teacher treats her like she can't even read." Their stories poured in, flood-like. The video wasn't just about Zion solving an equation. It was about what happened after. The bias, the disbelief, the system that refuses to acknowledge genius when it comes in brown skin and humble shoes. By late morning, the local news station in Birmingham ran a segment. Anchor on screen. Middle schooler solves college-level equation. School investigating. Interviews followed. Zion's parents declined on camera. Zion stayed silent, but his face appeared everywhere nonetheless. Hovering on phone screens, talked about in living rooms, text threads, teacher lounges. Inside the school's staff room, murmurs grew. Teachers pulled up the clip on their phones. Some shook their heads in awe. Others frowned. Harlan Crane's desk phone rang repeatedly. The calls were terse. Beneath his composed exterior, a pulse of panic had begun. At home, Zion's father, Leonard Walker, saw his own timeline fill with tags and notifications. His phone buzzed. "Proud of your son. What school is this? Need to talk about the system." Leonard sat on the porch swing, hands rough from years in the fields. Instead of holding a hoe, holding his phone. His son's victory felt heavy. Meanwhile, his mother, Gloria Walker, received messages too. Some supportive, some ugly. One early post. "He must have cheated. Farm kids don't do calculus." She deleted it after an hour, but saved a screenshot. It felt like a souvenir of the battlefield. As the clip spread, external voices arrived. An independent journalist from Atlanta tweeted the story. She noted, "Snapshot of racial bias in education, served fresh." Within hours, the story jumped nationally. Podcasts invited Zion's case into discussions about gifted Black children and the schools that fail them. The hashtag grew. Crane's reputation began to fracture. Alumni parents demanded answers. One posted on the school district's Facebook page. "So our top math teacher has been telling kids they're underqualified. Why did this take viral video to surface?" The superintendent's office sent internal memos. Staff were told to avoid commenting to press. Word leaked. Media frenzy at Weldon County Middle. Teachers found themselves slippery in hallways, glancing at phones as news alerts came in. Zion felt the surge like static in his chest. At school, the corridors were different. Some students whispered, "That kid from 3B." Others looked away. A handful came up during passing periods. "Cool job on the board." He nodded, uncertain how to respond. It was strange to be both invisible and everywhere at once. In class, Crane hovered at his desk, eyes distant. During lunch, he sat in solitude while others clustered. His old allies in the faculty avoided his gaze. It was as though a mirror had shattered in the room, and no one could decide who cleaned up the pieces. Unexpectedly, the local newspaper ran a full-page op-ed by a former student of Crane's, a black woman named Alicia Forbes. She wrote, "When I raised my hand, he told me you're good, for a girl. I believed him until I didn't." The revelation landed like a thunderclap. The twist, Crane's decades-old pattern of subtle dismissals now had public documentation, and the video of Zion had become the key, the catalyst. In the Walker household that evening, the tension was electric. Gloria paced the living room, phone in hand, reading comments, back and forth, eyes fiery. Leonard sat, silent example of restraint, watching her. Zion retreated to his notebook, doodling new equations, trying to find the calm inside the storm. Then the phone rang. It was from an unknown number, showing out of area. Gloria answered. A man's voice. "This is Dr. Malcolm Levins. I'm a mathematics professor at a major university. I've seen the clip of your son's solution, and I need to talk, and soon." Gloria's grip tightened. Leonard leaned forward. Zion froze. The professor's silvery voice said, "What your son did, it's not just correct, it's innovative." Gloria's eyes filled. Leonard's breath caught. Zion's heartbeat pounded. They were on the brink of something so much bigger than the classroom, bigger than the school, something that could either lift them or bury them under greater scrutiny. The Walker family exchanged glances, fear, hope, confusion, pride, all tangled together. Outside, the soybean fields floated in twilight, vast and unmoving, the wind waning. And inside the home, the world shifted. They were no longer just fighting for acknowledgement. They were now part of a story reaching far beyond Weldon County. A retired Ivy League math professor reaches out, claiming Zion's solution isn't just correct, it's groundbreaking. Late that evening, the Walker household sat under a single lamp in the living room. The muffled hum of the air conditioner, and the soft rustle of soybean stalks beyond the window. The only background. Dr. Malcolm Levin's phone call had lingered in the air like a promise or a challenge. Gloria leaned forward, her eyes bright in the lamp's glow, as the speakerphone crackled to life. On the other end came a voice measured and calm, yet brimming with something rare, unmistakable conviction. "Mrs. Walker, thank you for speaking with me," said Dr. Levins. "I've reviewed the footage, and then reviewed the mathematics. What your son did yesterday isn't simply correct. It demonstrates what we call mathematical intuition of the highest order." Gloria swallowed, her breath caught. Leonard leaned forward too, his farmer's hands folded in his lap. Zion sat with notebook open, but not writing, listening. Dr. Levins continued. Intuition like Zion's appears in only a few prodigies worldwide. The pattern of his reasoning, he approached the problem not by rote methods, but by structural insight, by seeing a symmetry where others saw only chaos. The word symmetry hung in the room, and Gloria felt it like a jolt. She glanced at Zion, equally silent, his chin tucked slightly, as though the compliment embarrassed him. "I would like to mentor him," Dr. Levin said. "Remotely, to begin with. Weekly sessions. If your family is willing, we might one day bring him here. Cambridge, Princeton, whatever suits him. But first he needs someone who recognizes what he can be, not someone who fears it." The gravity of the moment shifted the room's atmosphere. Leonard's usual simple nod turned into something heavy with hope and fear. Gloria stood, stepping over the edge of being just a mother, into being an advocate. "We'd be honored," she said, voice firm. "He's ready. He just needs a chance." Zion looked at his parents, then back at Dr. Levins's voice in the speaker. "Thank you," he said quietly. Dr. Levins responded with warmth rarely heard on a phone line. "You're welcome, Zion, but you must understand, this path won't be easy. You'll be under scrutiny. The moment someone sees a black kid solving something impossible, they'll ask the wrong questions." Gloria's heart sank a little. She looked at Zion's father. He gave her a small nod. She turned back to the phone. "We understand," she said. Over the next few days, things changed quickly. The mentoring began. Zoom calls at odd hours. Dr. Levins walking Zion through logic towers and mathematical frameworks, asking him questions like, "Why did you choose that substitution?" or "How did you visualize that transformation?" Zion responded with precision and humility. He was no longer a silent kid in the corner. He was an ascending mind, under recognized wings. At the same time, however, the school board reacted. Word had reached them that Zion might get attention far outside Weldon County. They weren't sure they liked it. At a board meeting, Parents and administrators debated down the hallway. It disrupts the curriculum, one teacher whispered to another. He's being elevated beyond his peers. What message does that send? The term disruption felt like a shield against admitting bias. Principal Ross received an official memo. Any external mentorship which bypasses district approval may contravene policy. She swallowed hard, her earlier internal conflict now wrapped in bureaucratic language. She called Crane in. They sat in her office. Crane, rigid and pale, said, "This goes way beyond a kid solving one problem. The community won't swallow this narrative." Ross nodded, not because she agreed, but because she realized how deep the machinery went. Meanwhile, Zion's classmates began behaving strangely. Some avoided him. Others approached with fake smiles. Sarah Jane offered a quiet "good job" one afternoon. Zion nodded but didn't look up. Malik caught his eye in the hallway and mouthed, "We're proud." Zion managed a small hooked thumb toward his chest, but the gesture was tentative. Gloria watched Zion at the dinner table one night. He picked at his food, his thoughts oscillating between new calculus levels and the cell phone alerts rolling in. News articles, tweets, an interview request. She forced him to eat. "You're doing more than most kids your age," she said softly. "Just remember your roots." Zion looked up, his eyes reflecting the amber porch light. "I will," he answered. The tension tightened when Dr. Levins invited Zion and his parents to a private video call. On screen appeared the professor in his study, books stacked behind him, a whiteboard with equations faintly visible. "Zion," he said, "I want you to submit your method for peer review. I believe you've developed a novel approach. That means your work needs documentation, publication. If you're willing, we'll prepare for a national youth mathematics competition." The unexpected twist hit the Walkers like an electric charge. This wasn't just a mentorship anymore. It could become a public scientific achievement. Gloria exhaled slowly. "We're ready." Leonard's face held awe. "A competition?" he asked. "Yes," Dr. Levin said, "but only if Zion wants it. This isn't just about recognition. It's about something larger, redefining what young minds should be able to do regardless of background." Zion felt both exhilaration and terror. His mind raced. Fields, equations, classrooms, cameras. He knew staying silent might protect him, but visibility might change him.
Then came the blow.
2 days later, the school board released a statement. The district is reviewing policies concerning external mentorship. No final decisions yet. The wording was cold, bureaucratic. The subtext, "We're backing off." The board called a special closed-door meeting with Principal Ross and Crane, instructing them to prepare for community reaction management. At night, Zion lay awake, wide-eyed. He heard the distant hum of crickets and the soft pulse of his thoughts. What if this gets taken away? He thought. He pressed his palm to his chest. The equation was still inside his mind, alive, whispering. Gloria knocked gently on his door. "Zion? Blanket ready for you?" He shifted. "Thanks." She sat on the edge of his bed. "You know what you're doing is gonna make noise. But I want you to know, I'm always with you." He nodded. "I know, Mama." She smiled, trying to sound hopeful. "The world might not see you now, but some of us do." He closed his eyes, imagining the chalkboard, the numbers, the viral footage. "I'll keep going," he said. She reached up, smoothing a stray curl. "That's all I ask." As she left, Zion turned his gaze to the ceiling, thinking of Dr. Levins's words. Of fields, school policies, cameras, mathematics, and the word disruption. In the next morning's paper, a headline read, "Local student receives international attention. School district under review." Beneath it, a smaller line, "Teacher comments spark backlash." But the main story was Zion's method being studied, and the board's resistance painted them as unwilling to nurture genius. In room 3B, Crane sat at his desk, his phone laying face up with message alerts. He didn't respond. The classroom door opened, and Malik walked in, paused, looked at Zion's seat, now empty. The weight of what had happened hung in the air, unspoken. And then the unexpected twist. During the Zoom session the next day, Dr. Levin said, "I should tell you this. I once taught someone who did something similar. His work was lost, suppressed before publication. I don't want that fate for you." The implication was clear. Academic and racial politics were intertwined. Zion was entering not just a competition, but a system that had deliberately held back minds like his before. Zion's jaw hardened. He looked at the whiteboard he'd turned into his personal canvas. He was ready. Mr. Crane goes on local radio and calls Zion a media experiment, doubling down on his races. The mood in the town of Weldon County shifted as swiftly and quietly as the wind through the soybean fields after a storm. It began with a few conversations in church parking lots, in the aisles of the local grocery store, in the rusted bleached benches of the high school bleachers. Parents started to whisper about what they'd seen. Some felt proud of the viral clip of Zion Walker. Others felt threatened by it. The teacher's lounge at Weldon County Middle School became a zone of hushed tension, glances and open resentment. At the center of it all stood Harlan Crane, once venerated, now unraveling. Protests began outside the school on a crisp autumn afternoon. A small group of black parents and community members gathered holding handmade signs. Brilliance doesn't choose skin. Let Zion learn. Stop silencing us. They stood on the cracked sidewalk, voices calm but firm. From the opposite end, a smaller group of white parents gathered 2 flags, bumper stickers, and a clear sense of defensiveness. Their signs read, "Respect experience. Don't let politics replace teaching. We support Mr. Crane." The division was plain, slicing through the town's complacency like a hurricane through wheat. Inside the school, Principal Dana Ross sat rigid in her office as the phone rang repeatedly. The superintendent's office had instructed caution. Public statements were to be managed, but dozens of parents made calls. The board meetings overflowed with emotion. Crane refused to attend one of the first sessions, citing a personal matter, and instead the room heard his absence as a statement. Zion arrived at school that day to find the atmosphere different. When he passed through the hallways, some students nodded, some whispered, but more than a few looked away entirely. At lunch he tried to sit with Malik and a couple of others, but a group of freshmen stared, their faces blank. He realized his place in that space had shifted. He was no longer just a kid who sits quietly. He was the kid in the news. He felt the weight of that identity, and it made his ribs ache with awareness. Then came the official notice. Zion was suspended pending investigation for causing unrest and disrupting the educational environment. The letter came home with his backpack, delivered by Ross's assistant. Gloria and Leonard sat together at the kitchen table, reading the words in their yellow-tinged lamplight. Leonard's face hardened, deep lines cutting harsher in the half-light. "They've done this before," he muttered. "They'll use him as the example to keep others quiet." Gloria shook her head slowly. "They're making the kid the problem, when the real problem's the system." Leonard stood up, wearing the stubbornness of the land he planted. "Then I'll be heard." The next morning he arrived outside the school, wearing his old work boots, farm jacket on his broad shoulders. He asked for a megaphone, spoke into the crisp air. "My son didn't break the system. The system broke him. And this town will pay for ignoring that." His voice echoed across the quiet fields nearby, rattling through more people than he expected. In that moment an unexpected face stepped forward, a former student of Crane's, a woman named Alicia Forbes. She raised her hand and asked to be heard. She stood before the crowd, tears shimmering. "When I was 17, she said, voice trembling, "I raised my hand in Mr. Crane's class. He told me I was smart, for a girl, and then he shut me down when I dared to lead the study group." The crowd breathed as though the air had been held and released. Her testimony changed the dynamic. This wasn't just about one boy and one equation. It was about patterns and consequences. Suddenly the facade of respect around Crane cracked. Parents who had defended him looked away. Teachers who silently worried found their voice. The board shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Crane, once untouchable, sensed the ground beneath him turn muddy. By midweek the leak came. An internal memo from the district's Human Resources Department was posted anonymously in a local newsroom's inbox. It bore a title in bold, "Summary of Complaints Against H. Crane." The document listed multiple complaints going back more than 10 years. Allegations of dismissive comments, racial bias, failure to accommodate students, all quietly resolved with private letters or non-renewal of contracts elsewhere. The twist: one of the complaints was filed by a white student who said Crane told him, "You don't belong here," during an honors class. If white students had been told that, what did it mean for black students? The board held an emergency meeting, closed to media but not to whispers. Ross sat at the table, Crane at one end, parents and teachers filling the rest. The tension crackled like overhead lights in a storm. Crane's face was pale, his voice low as he defended himself. "I've taught thousands of students. Some succeed, some don't. It's not personal. but his words clung to the cold room unconvincingly. Leonard stood up. It's always been personal, if you're from the wrong side of the line. My boy is no experiment, no showpiece, no cheat. He's just smart, and he's paying for it. The board chairman banged his gavel, calling order. The room settled, but not peacefully. Outside, the newspaper trucks rolled in. Journalists took notes. Local social media outlets posted live video of the demonstration. The new hashtag joined the old. Justice for Zion. Teach right. Crane accountability. The crowd outside swelled beyond rooftop crops of parents and students. It included alumni, community activists, even some teachers who preferred anonymity. Crane's schedule changed. He was pulled from his advanced math class temporarily, while the district considered his future. Rumors spread of an internal ethics investigation. For the first time in his career, his footsteps echoed down the hallway without deference. Doors remained closed in his wake. Zion watched all this from a distance. He tried reading geometry that afternoon, but his mind churned with the board meeting, the leaked memo, his father's speech, the hush in classrooms. The silence was no longer passive. It was charged. He felt exposed but also seen. The child who once stayed quiet was now at the center of something larger. The classroom, the place where his mind belonged, seemed to tilt beneath him. That night, in the Walker home, the land outside silent, Gloria typed an email to Attorney Hightower. Leonard sat nearby, his old work boots still on. Zion sketched equations, but his eyes flicked often to his phone, to notifications he tried to ignore. Gloria read the board meeting recap she'd clipped from a local paper. They're calling this a distraction to the educational mission, she said softly. They're framing Zion's brilliance as the problem. Her voice cracked only slightly. Leonard nodded. They prefer quiet mediocrity to uncomfortable truth. He reached over and touched Zion's shoulder. You did good today. Zion didn't look up, but he nodded. The weight of those words, you did good today, settled in him, bitter and sweet. In the days that followed, the classroom saw subtle shifts. Teachers altered their seating charts. Some students avoided discussion of the equation. One teacher wrote on the board, "In class we will focus on curriculum support." The unspoken message was clear. Don't risk standing out. Don't risk being Zion. The example the system preferred was small, compliant, invisible. And in the basement offices of the district, officials met quietly, complaining about negative media, declining donations, possible federal investigations. They circulated the internal memo among themselves, worried about legal exposure. Crane's reputation, once solid, now teetered. Some parents who had once said support Mr. Crane quietly deleted those Facebook posts, replaced them with tepid ones about due process. Then the unexpected twist. A donor to the school district, someone who had funded the advanced math program for years, sent an email that was mistakenly CC'd to the board, and then became public. The donor demanded his name be removed. He stated he was no longer confident the district fosters excellence equitably. That email spread faster than any protest sign. Money, it turned out, followed recognition, and the recognition was going now not to the teacher or the district, but to the student they didn't want to see. The town's ugly truth wasn't just about bias, it was about resources, power, and who got to shine. Gloria looked at the email as she tucked Zion into bed. They're afraid of what they see, she told him. Zion closed his eyes. I'm not afraid. She kissed his forehead. Then they should be. Outside, the fields were empty now, the wind slow, the air quiet, watching. But they both knew the storm was only just gathering. A leaked internal memo reveals Crane has had multiple complaints over the years, all buried by the district. The boardroom at the district office felt colder than the early morning breeze outside the window. Long fluorescent lights accentuated the formality, the long table of gray laminate stretching between chairs where administrators and community leaders gathered. For the first time, the fate of 12-year-old Zion Walker was being debated on a symbolic stage. A school board hearing. Pressure weighed on every shoulder. Inside, Dana Ross sat at the head, her face composed but fatigued, the consequences of her decisions visible in the faint lines around her eyes. Across from her, board members in suits shifted in their seats, some with guarded brows, others with open concern. Community leaders, parents, teachers, and activists filled the back rows. Some held handmade signs, reinstate Zion, education equity, others clutched folders and legal pads, ready to speak. The murmurs were constant. The equation, the viral clip, the accusation. Gloria Walker entered the room hand in hand with Zion's father, Leonard Walker. They wore their Sunday best, Gloria in a modest dress, Leonard in his sturdy jacket that still carried the farm's scent of earth, and Zion followed quietly, clutching his notebook under his arm as though it were armor. When seats were offered, they remained standing until invited. The room recognized their arrival. The hearing started with Ross reading a statement. We are here to address concerns regarding the suspension of Mr. Walker's son and policy compliance regarding talent advancement and external mentorship. Her voice carried the weight of bureaucracy. The words did not yet reflect the human dimensions of the case. The first to speak was a white parent, standing stiff-backed. Mr. Crane is a respected teacher, she began. He has guided many students to success. We mustn't rush to judgment. Excellence takes time, and a child must not be thrust ahead before he is ready. The tone was polite but the message clear. Zion's potential was a disruption. Then a black teacher from the district rose. She paused, then said, I taught Zion's older sister. I've seen what happens when bright black children are encouraged, only so far. This isn't about rushing him. It's about giving him space to soar. Holding him back is the problem. Her words unsettled more than the first speaker's. Gloria took a deep breath. When her turn came, she moved to the podium with surprising poise. My son solved a problem that even seniors could not, she said. Her voice was steady, but inside she was fierce. And he did it while seated at that back row. Accusing him now of causing unrest is the real injustice. I demand an independent investigation into how our schools treat gifted black children, and how this board blocked his external mentorship. The room went quiet. She held her gaze on the board, unblinking. An administrator from the district answered, We are reviewing all policies and will comply with a third-party audit. A ripple of relief passed through the Walker side of the room. Leonard exhaled, but his face remained stern. An audit after the fact isn't the same as protection now, he said, voice low but firm. He turned and left, Gloria following with Zion in tow. Outside the hearing room, in the hallway, Zion found a quiet corner. He opened his notebook and stared at the last page he'd written, a sketch of a mathematical model, lines and arrows, variables interlinked in a fresh representation of an equation he had developed in the past week. He felt an electric thrill. The model seemed to ready itself for something bigger than the classroom. That evening at home, Dr. Malcolm Levins appeared on lecture video chat. Zion, he said, you're not just solving problems, you're shaping them. Your model shows a way to reduce complexity through structural symmetry that we seldom see at any age. Zion sat upright. Gloria and Leonard watched on second screen, pride shining in their eyes. They understood then, this was beyond remediation. It was innovation. As the hearing progressed, the opposition grew uneasy. Some parents argued Zion's acceleration would make other students feel inadequate. Others worried about disrupting the traditional learning environment. One teacher whispered to another, what happens when he surpasses the teacher? The fear was implicit. In the district office, the board voted to postpone a decision on the mentorship program. Zion remained suspended during the hearing's outcome. The official reason, pending evaluation of academic placement and external engagement. For Zion and his family, that word pending felt like a pause without end. Unexpectedly in the week following, an email from the National Youth STEM Organization arrived. It was addressed to Zion. Congratulations. We invite you to present your model at the National Youth Innovation Summit this spring, full travel scholarship included. Gloria gasped when she read it aloud at dinner. Leonard's fork clattered. Zion shut his notebook with a soft click. The model he had sketched at a small Alabama farmhouse had now drawn attention far beyond any expectation. Gloria leaned forward. Zion, do you want to go? He nodded, eyes bright with determination and fear. Yes. Leonard frowned. But what if the district blocks you? Zion looked at him. Then we'll cross that next line. Gloria reached for his hand. They can't stop you forever. The next morning at school felt even more surreal. Zion walked through the same hallways, yet under a different glare. Some faces now carried admiration, others resentment. He saw Crane in the distance, talking quietly with a group of older teachers. Crane's head was bowed slightly, the expression unreadable. The game had changed, and Zion sensed it. In the boardroom, Ross prevailed on the board to commission an independent review, but also issued a statement of caution. We are committed to fairness and opportunity, but we must maintain instructional integrity. The language sounded platitude heavy. Many left the room dissatisfied. neither fully supportive nor entirely obstructive. That afternoon, Gloria found a voice message on her phone. Zion, if you want to talk about how to prepare for the summit, you're ready. It was from Dr. Levins. She watched Zion's fingers trace the notebook edges. They're treating your brilliance like a threat, she said. But you're not the problem, kid. You're the beginning of a solution. Zion exhaled slowly. The tension inside him didn't ease. The hearing, the suspension, the national invitation. He felt caught between two worlds, one where he was punished for being smart, and another where he was celebrated for being unique. Neither felt entirely safe. That night, the Walker family sat on the porch again. In the darkness, the fields whispered secrets to the wind. Gloria said softly, "Tomorrow they'll decide your fate. But you already changed something." Zion looked at her. "I hope so." She rested her cheek on his head.
You already have.
And beneath the stars, in the quiet of the farmhouse, Zion opened his notebook and added another layer to his model. Variables adjusting, boundaries extending. He wasn't just preparing to present. He was preparing to shape the future. Zion's new model earns an invitation to present at a National Youth Innovation Summit, but he's still suspended. The morning air at the Walker farmhouse was crisp, the light pale as the sun crept over the soybean fields. Inside, Gloria Walker stood at the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching the horizon. There was a stillness to the scene, quiet, but charged. She had just listened to the offer the school district made, an apology in private. Zion reinstated, but no public recognition, no mention of wrongful accusation, no acknowledgement of bias. It was thin justice wearing a mask. Leonard Walker came in from the barn, dirt under his nails, boots heavy. He sat at the table. "What did they say?" he asked gravely. Gloria turned to him, her voice taut. "They'll reinstate Zion as long as we sign a non-disclosure agreement. No press, no social media statement. Just quietly go back." Leonard blinked. "So they admit nothing? They just let us walk away in silence?" She nodded. "They'll say it's good for his education, for the district. But they won't admit they ever made a mistake." Zion sat at the counter, notebook open, pencil idle. He looked small this morning, quiet, but inside him something was roaring. "Sounds like a trap," he said softly. Gloria reached over and squeezed his shoulder. "You're right, and we're not walking into it." For the first time, the Walkers felt the full weight of the moment. It wasn't simply about math or school. It was about truth. And the district's version of truth was one they couldn't accept. Gloria made the call to attorney Caleb Hightower that afternoon. Her voice firm though exhaustion tugged at her edges. "We're rejecting their offer," she told him. "We're moving forward with your filing." Hightower responded with professional calm. "We'll prepare the complaint under Title V. We'll request injunctive relief, public recognition, and reform. Make no mistake, this will become a federal issue." Gloria exhaled. "Thank you." And suddenly the town turned. At Zoe's cafe, the regulars paused when Globe Walker family walked in. On the church steps, some nodded sympathetically, others slid past with polite detachment. Social media in Weldon County exploded with commentary. Some cheered the family's stance. Others branded them troublemaking outsiders disrupting tradition. Zion's friends started whispering. Malik sat beside him at lunch with a look of concern. "You ready for this?" he asked in a low voice. Zion shrugged. "I don't know what ready means." Malik nodded. "Just don't go it alone." By week's end, the threats began. Anonymous notes left in the mailbox. A phone message with silence on the other end. At school, Zion found a crumpled scrap on his desk. "Keep your mouth quiet." He folded it and tucked it into his notebook. Gloria found it later and asked if he wanted her to call the police. He shook his head. "Not yet," he said. "They're just afraid of me thinking." In a Board of Education meeting, Ross read a statement. "We remain committed to every student's success. We regret any disruption that may have occurred." The silence from the district was louder than any apology. Crane sat in the audience, expression blank, a shadow behind the others. The atmosphere crackled. Gloria watched from the gallery with Leonard beside her. She touched his arm. "They're giving public smiles while behind the curtain. They're fighting us." Leonard nodded. "We knew what we signed up for." Unexpectedly, the phone rang late one evening. It was Zion's email, forwarded from Dr. Levins. "I've arranged a short-term scholarship if you leave Weldon. We've found a summer program in Boston." Zion felt the shock he could leave. He could escape, but at the same time he felt the tug of home. The soybean fields, his father's voice, his mother's unwavering support. Gloria saw his hesitation. "You may go," she said softly, "but you won't run away." Zion looked up. "I don't want to run. I want to change it here." Gloria nodded. "Then we'll stay and fight it." The windows rattled that night from a sudden gust. For a moment it sounded like the fields moaning. Gloria checked the barn lights before bed. She paused at the door, unsettled by a sense someone, or something, walked past the old wooden siding. She shook it off. By next day the barn door had a smear of red paint, and the message sprayed across it: "Stop teaching that boy to think." Gloria saw it first. Her lips parted, then closed. Leonard looked at her, shocked. Zion stared up from the steps, his notebook forgotten in his hand. In those seconds, everything changed. Someone vandalizes the Walker family's barn, leaving behind a message: "Stop teaching that boy to think." The courthouse in Birmingham felt impossibly large and solemn that morning, its marble floors glinting faintly under the overhead lights. Outside, the wind rattled the grand columns. Inside, the murmur of people settling into wooden benches filled the air with tension. The case of 12-year-old Zion Walker had grown beyond the corridors of the small rural school. It now demanded a stage worthy of its significance. Thousands of miles of bias, expectation and courage were distilled into this moment. On the bench sat Judge Marianne Ellis, an African-American woman, whose reputation for fairness was known across the state. She scanned the participants, the district attorney flanked by legal advisors, representatives of the school board, the Walkers seated with their attorney Caleb Hightower, and at the defense table, the district superintendent and a few board members. One empty chair caught attention, occupied by no one, but the whisper said it was designated for Harlan Crane, the embattled math teacher. He had requested to attend. The courtroom felt heavy with history and expectation. Judge Ellis cleared her throat. "Thank you all for appearing today. The hearing before this court is to evaluate the allegations brought by Mr. Walker and his family against the Weldon County School District. We will permit testimony, exhibits, and live demonstration of relevant evidence." Her voice was calm, but the weight of every word settled like dust in the room. Attorney Hightower rose first. He paced slightly. "Your Honor, the facts of this case are simple yet profound. My client, Zion Walker, a student of uncommon talent, was accused of academic dishonesty after demonstrating a mathematical solution that defied the expectations placed upon him because of his background. We intend to show," he said, pausing to let it register, "that the district's actions were grounded not in error but in prejudice." He returned to his seat. Gloria squeezed Zion's hand under the table. Leonard exhaled slowly, his expression tight. The superintendent, pale and composed, responded, "Your Honor, the district contends that the procedures for investigation were followed, that the student's status is in question under accelerated placement and external mentorship policy. We do not admit wrongdoing, only that there is now inquiry into the matter." His tone was neutral, but those who watched his face noticed a flicker, fear or relief. They couldn't tell. Then lead evidence was introduced. The video of Zion standing at the chalkboard in room 3B, solving the advanced calculus challenge. The camera angle showed his back, his focused stance, the chalk moving in deliberate arcs. The courtroom watched. The judge leaned forward in her seat, her hands folded. The hush felt unnatural in its intensity. Judge Ellis said quietly, "I will now permit the student to perform his demonstration." A murmur rippled through spectators. At that, Zion rose. His knees felt light, his palms slightly damp, but when he stepped to the portable blackboard placed at the front of the chamber, he was calm. He took chalk in hand. The audience watched: reporters, school officials, parents, civil rights observers. All held their collective breath. He began by rewriting the original problem, the limit as x approached infinity of a nested function of integrals, symbols curved across the surface. Then he rewrote his steps: substitutions, symmetry, hidden variable separations, cancellation. This was the mathematics he had carried inside him, shaped out of hours of homework, long nights, under a farmhouse lamp, the hum of soybean fields outside his window. The judge leaned, her eyes steady. Until now she had listened. Now she watched. Zion moved to the next part, his new model. On the second board he sketched a structure of nodes and transformations, his own design, visualizing a mapping that generalized the original problem into multiple dimensions. His hand was certain, his posture composed. The entire courtroom sat in silence. At one point the defense attorney rose. Your Honor, he said, hesitating. We have experts on standby if the student's demonstration fails. I just wish to note that this is unusual. The courtroom shifted. Unusual. That settled into every mind. But Zion did not fail. When he placed the final chalk stroke, the crowd exhaled as one. The judge quietly said, "Thank you, Mr. Walker. You may step down." His heart pounded, but his face was still. He returned to his seat, notebook in hand. His father's hand covered his own. His mother's eyes glowed with pride. Judge Ellis opened her notes. She said, "I find the demonstration compelling. I will take a brief recess before proceeding with further testimony." The room relaxed in tension, but an undercurrent of tremor remained. Minutes later, the superintendent unexpectedly stood. His face was pale, his tie loose. "Your Honor," he said, voice wavering, "I must submit my resignation, effective immediately." A stunned silence overtook the courtroom. The chairman of the board looked around. Crane's seat remained empty. The superintendent turned to the judge. "I have been pressured by district officials to shield certain staff members from complaint investigations. I cannot remain in this role." The words echoed like thunder in a dry church. Gloria's hand flew to her mouth. Leonard's knuckles turned white against the wood of the bench. The judge closed her eyes briefly. "We will note this resignation on record," she said quietly. "We shall proceed accordingly." The entire system shifted in that moment. The mask of authority cracked, and the issue was now laid bare in judicial daylight. Outside, journalists captured the moment, the superintendent leaving by side door, his head low. The Walkers emerged into the autumn air. What felt like victory carried its own weight. Zion exhaled slowly, his notebook tucked at his side. His mother watched him and whispered, "Your name will never be silent now." He nodded. Back inside, Crane's empty chair remained a symbol. The teacher who once stood unquestioned, now sat aside. The judge continued. Testimonies followed, revelations about internal investigations, withheld memos, teacher complaints piled up. The district's veneer of control peeled away. Yet despite the triumph of truth, a question lingered in Zion's mind. As he walked past reporters, what comes next? Because doing the work had brought him this far, but surviving what it meant would need something more. The superintendent suddenly resigns mid-hearing, revealing he was pressured to protect Crane. The skyline of Washington, D.C., glittered with possibility as twilight settled over the Capitol. The stone facades of historic buildings, the glint of the Potomac in the fading light, all of it felt larger than life. For Zion Walker, stepping into the lobby of the Innovation Summit felt like entering a different world. He arrived alongside Dr. Malcolm Levins, who had arranged for his travel, lodging, and inclusion in the summit's youth innovation track. The expectation hovered in the air. This was no longer simply a school board, hearing or local fight. It was national attention. Zion's first challenge came less from the program, and more from the soft realities around him. As he walked through the conference center, he overheard conversations that weren't about him, yet were clearly about him. A panelist whispered to a colleague, "Is that the black student they're talking about? He must have a coach behind him." The insinuation stung. Zion stopped mid-step and caught himself before turning away. Dr. Levins noticed. He placed a steady hand on Zion's shoulder. "Let them speak," he said quietly. "You'll answer with your work." Later, Zion sat at a breakfast table, surrounded by gifted youth, children of scientists, prodigies in engineering, budding researchers already published. They greeted him with polite smiles, but the distance was palpable. One young woman asked him where he went to school. He named his middle school in rural Alabama. She smiled. A little forced. "That's brave," she said. "Must have been something." Zion offered a nod. Inside, he recognized the pause in her voice, where many would say amazing. She said, that small word carried a weight of its own. By midday, the panel discussion began. Zion found himself in a session titled, Youth Innovation and Equity, Breaking Barriers in STEM. The moderator introduced him among other speakers, then posed a question to him and his peers. How do we ensure talent is recognized everywhere, not just in elite institutions? The first responses came from students who cited resources, sponsorships, mentorship. When it reached Zion's turn, a panelist, white, senior, academically distinguished, leaned forward and asked, "But is your achievement here genuine, or is it a coached performance? Are we witnessing your brilliance, or someone else's?" The room fell quiet. Zion looked at the chalkboard station prepared for him, then back at the audience. He did not answer the question in words. Instead, he said, I'd rather show you. With that, he walked to the demonstration table. A portable whiteboard stood ready. He set up markers, glanced at Dr. Levins, who nodded. Then he began. The room dimmed lights for projection. His board glowed under spotlights. In minutes, Zion sketched the bones of his model, the same one that had earned him nationwide attention. He explained the structure silently, using diagrams and connections, his voice steady. This variable links here, then transforms through symmetry. If you isolate the boundary and shift the axis, you reduce error by 37%. The audience watched, captivated. A hush that felt like something sacred settled. At one point, the young woman from breakfast leaned over and whispered, "He's really doing it." Indeed, the whiteboard filled with symbols and arrows, concepts that looked like advanced research rather than middle school work. Zion's demonstration held for the length of the session. When he finished, the panelist who had questioned him nodded slowly, seemed forced into respect. The moderator applauded. The audience rose to their feet. In that moment, Zion's position changed. He was no longer just that kid from Alabama. He was a maker of ideas. But almost immediately, shadows followed. After the applause, as students mingled in the hall, Zion overheard two conference staff whispering, "We'll need extra cover for his schedule. Media will want him. Sponsors might want to showcase him. We must handle this carefully." The implication was clear. His talent had become a commodity. He felt a cold knot of unease. At dinner, Dr. Levins asked Zion how he felt. Zion said quietly, "I made them think. But they were thinking about me, not what I did." Dr. Levins nodded. "That's the cost of being the exception." Zion looked at him, trying to understand. "What happens after they stop clapping?" he asked. Dr. Levins's silence answered better than a speech. The next morning, Zion's schedule exploded. Interviews, panels, photo sessions, media crews gathered. He walked the halls of the summit, his notebook under his arm, the weight of expectation heavy on each step, and with visibility came scrutiny, questions about where he came from, how he learned, whether his parents or teacher had coached him, whether this was an anomaly to be harvested and shelved. Then the unexpected twist. Mid-morning, a high-level delegate from the U.S. Department of Education entered the hall, asking to speak with Zion privately. He introduced himself as an advisor to the secretary, said he had followed the case in the news, and asked if Zion could spare 5 minutes that afternoon. Zion exchanged a look with Dr. Levins. The invitation felt like honor, yet also like a trap. "Why now?" Zion agreed. He spent the afternoon rehearsing quietly. The meeting was scheduled in a small conference room. At 4:00 p.m., he and his parents arrived. The delegate's demeanor was cordial, but measured. He said, "Mr. Walker, your work today caught national attention. The department wants to explore how we can scale what you've developed. But first, we should ask, are you comfortable with the scrutiny? With being a public figure rather than a student?" Zion felt a mix of excitement and dread. His mother took his hand. She answered for him. "He's ready because he must be ready." The delegate nodded, then dropped the question, "Would you consider consulting for the department? We're building a youth innovation initiative, and you'd be ideal." The offer stunned them. Zion looked at his parent. Leonard blinked. Gloria's lips parted. Zion's mind raced. District hearings, threats, barn vandalism, all still in his rear view. Now he was being asked to join the policy machine. They left the room in silence. Outside, the Washington air felt colder now. Zion walked between buildings, his steps slower, ponderous. Dr. Levins met him, expression unreadable. "You did it," he said softly. "But let's talk about what you signed up for." Zion nodded. The memory of the delegate's words weighed on him like chalk dust. That evening, the summit held a gala dinner. Zion sat at a table of guest honorees. He chatted, barely. The glimmering chandeliers reflected ambition. One fellow honoree, a girl whose father was an MIT professor, said quietly, "This is amazing, but exhausting. People expect us to carry more than ideas. They expect change." Zion nodded, thinking of how change had made his farm quiet this week, how his mother's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. The summit's bright lights masked darker textures. In the final session the next day, Zion received a standing ovation again. Cameras flashed. But as he scanned the auditorium, he spotted a familiar face. Mr. Crane, standing at the back row. The teacher looked smaller than he once did, swallowed in his own crowd. Zion's stomach clenched. The summit's applause ringed in his ears. But something else echoed. the risk of being applauded and then quietly forgotten. Leaving the conference center, Zion found his father waiting outside, leaning against the rental car. The night was cool. You did more than we imagined, Leonard said. Zion exhaled. And more than I expected, he replied. But what happens next? Leonard looked at him, saw the oscillation between pride and fear. We'll find out together. Gloria joined them, and together they walked past the marble pillars, toward the car, toward home, but not quite back to where they had been. As they drove away, Zion's phone lit up. An email from Dr. Levins. The subject, next steps and shadows. He opened it. The department contacted us. They'll be in touch. Prepare. Zion closed his eyes. The summit had been a victory, but also a summons. In the back of his mind, he replayed that question from the panelist. Are you an anomaly or coached? He realized now the question was beside the point. The real question was, will you be allowed to lead or forced into a label? The Department of Education requests a private meeting with Zion and his family. The late afternoon light in the conference room of the U.S. Department of Education felt sterile and surreal. The family sat together, Gloria Walker beside her husband Leonard Walker, and their son Zion Walker in between them, across a long polished table from government officials. The promise of recognition and reform hung heavy in the air, but the subtext felt colder containment. The lead official, Assistant Secretary Ruth Delgado, cleared her throat. Thank you for meeting with us, Mr. and Mrs. Walker. And Zion. The department recognizes the seriousness of your case. She paused. We are pleased to provide a full scholarship pipeline for Zion into our Youth STEM initiative, along with a grant for Weldon County to review their advanced placement protocols. Gloria nodded. Leonard's jaw clenched. Zion sat still but alert. Delgado continued. We will also issue policy guidelines to all districts nationwide regarding the support of gifted students from underserved backgrounds. We believe this will address the root issues. Gloria's mind cataloged the promises: scholarship, grant, pipeline, guidelines. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The official smiled and added, however, at this time the department will not investigate past allegations of systemic racism in the district. We must stay focused on forward-looking solutions, not retroactive litigation. The phrase landed like a punch. Leonard leaned forward. So you won't examine the history of this district? The many complaints we heard about Mr. Crane, about how black students were. Delgado held up a hand. We understand your frustration, but our remit is to enable opportunity moving forward. The past is complex. Gloria's eyes flashed. Opportunity means nothing if the scarred ground underneath keeps causing damage. Delgado nodded politely. We hear that, Mrs. Walker. We hope our actions will help heal those wounds. As the meeting progressed, Zion looked at the officials. He listened to the talk of pipelines, grants, national initiatives, but his mind drifted back to the dusty chalkboard in his old classroom, the lean of his back against the farmhouse door, the barn door spray message that still stung. He realized the equation in his mind was turning from mathematics to manifest. After the meeting ended, the Walkers walked outside into the late afternoon air. Gloria asked quietly, You heard what they said? Leonard nodded. They want to give us something, but not fix what broke us. Zion remained silent. She's right, his mother said. Charity without justice is still oppression. Zion finally spoke. They're nice words, but the walls didn't move. Gloria placed a hand on his shoulder. Then we'll move them ourselves. That night, in the Walker kitchen, Zion opened his notebook. He wrote the word manifesto at the top of a fresh page. Below, he began to scribble. When the system honors you, but does not owe you, what do you become? The question felt raw. Gloria watched him, her face lit by the single overhead bulb. Leonard came in with mugs of tea, setting them gently on the table as though giving the night some normal shape. Zion read them what he had written so far. I write not to be seen. I write to be heard. If brilliance is punished with silence, then our silence is no longer safe. Gloria's breath hitched. Leonard's eyes narrowed. They did not interrupt him. They simply watched. Over the next week, the pipeline offer was publicized. Social media and press releases framed the Walkers as success stories. The rural talent given national opportunity. Zoe's Cafe plastered a story under the headline, From Soybean Fields to STEM Pipeline. The town's mood shifted again from suspicion to being placated. Some parents congratulated Gloria in the grocery store. Others muttered about outside attention. The mask the department offered looked like progress, but the walkers felt the seams. One afternoon, Dr. Levins called. Zion, good news. The scholarship is real. The program wants to fast-track your submission for publication. Zion answered. Thank you, sir. Dr. Levins paused. But listen, I need to warn you. The system rewards silence. It rewards compliance. When you become the poster child, you stop being the problem. But do you stop being yourself? Zion felt the weight. I haven't forgotten where I came from, he answered. Dr. Levins paused again. Then keep your voice. This pipeline can carry you far, but not until you decide whether you'll ride it or ride it on your terms. Gloria heard the conversation from the doorway. Later she asked Zion, do you want to ride it on your terms? He looked up from the notebook. Yes. I have to. She nodded. Then we will. Unexpectedly, the barn door once defaced had been cleaned and repainted by Leonard. He wanted to reclaim the space, but Gloria found a new piece of graffiti behind a sill. Pretend smart. Don't change system. Leonard saw it and shook his head. They keep talking, he said, not looking. Gloria sighed. Then we'll show them what we see. In the midst of public praise, Zion wrote relentlessly. Page after page of his manifesto poured out. The equation of exclusion, variables of resource disparity, the limit of expectation, the integral of bias. He described how his teachers' micro-dismissals had built a wall around his potential, how the district's silence was not absence but complicity. The model on his desk became the blueprint for educational transformation, not just a math problem but a system problem. At the same time, the school district announced their Equity Review Task Force, funded by the DOE grant. The task force promised to study referral patterns, advanced placement access, and student support structures. The press covered it. The walkers watched from the sidelines. They'll study us until we forget we were harmed, Gloria murmured. Zion agreed. One morning, a peer-reviewed journal invited Zion to submit his statement, Youth Voices in STEM Equity. The invitation was exhilarating. But with it arrived a clause: the journal would publish his name, but required no mention of the district or teacher by name. The offer seemed generous, but its conditions were telling. Zion looked at his parents. They want my voice, but not my story. Gloria squeezed his hand. Then you'll write it anyway. Late that evening, an email landed in the Walker's inbox. The department's press office wrote, we plan a short film featuring the Walker family's story in our upcoming campaign. Working title, Opportunity Realized. Release date 2 months. Gloria's stomach churned. Leonard frowned. It's not about your son's story. It's about our image. Zion exhaled. They want the hero, not the system. He opened the newly written final draft of his manifesto. The pages described the moment in room 3B, the viral video, the hearing, the summit, and then named names, teachers, administrators, district agents, even board members who had buried complaints. He paused on one name, a well-respected board chair who had signed the memo shielding Crane years before. The unexpected twist: one of the named individuals was a parent of a student in Zion's class, someone who had publicly supported Crane but privately filed a complaint. Gloria read a paragraph aloud. When your voice is heard but your name silenced, your story becomes the poster, not the pattern. She looked at Zion. Are you sure you want this? Zion nodded. If I don't name them, someone else will. And then they'll get away with it again. Leonard rested his hand on both their shoulders. Then we'll stand by you. Before the manifesto could be published, it leaked, sent anonymously to a media site. The link was forwarded to the attorney. Caleb Hightower called from his office. They've got it. It's public. Gloria leaned against the kitchen counter. Zion closed his note. Leonard stood by the window looking out at the fields. The promise of scholarship, of reform, of pipeline, those were still there. But now they were overshadowed by something more dangerous: truth. Zion's manifesto leaks early, and it names names. The leak of Zion Walker's manifesto detonated like thunder that swept across educational, legal, and social landscapes. From his quiet desk in rural Alabama to the glowing screens of national media, his words reverberated. When your voice is heard but your name silenced, your story becomes the poster, not the pattern. In that moment, Zion's story transcended his path. It became a movement. Across the country, teachers in worn-out urban schools whispered to one another. Students passed links in class. Activists held hurried lunches with organizers. One teacher in Detroit posted on social media, My name was buried because I never looked like the hero of a math problem. Zion changed that. A student in Atlanta tweeted. He named names. Then others followed. Every counselor who told me I should aim just for college. Yours is next. Suddenly the manifesto had gravity. It wasn't just an account of one child's injustice. It was an indictment of a system. In the fallout, Harlan Crane's world cracked. He filed a lawsuit against Zion, his family, and the news outlet that published the manifesto. The complaint cited defamation, reputation damage, and false allegations. But the lawsuit became a Pandora's box. When the legal teams demanded disclosure of evidence, internal emails from the school district surfaced. Emails that referenced quietly closing complaints, not escalating to board review, and maintain staffing stability. One email from a longtime administrator said, "If we make an example of him, we risk community backlash, but if we ignore him, we undermine our authority." The implication, Zion's quiet brilliance had disturbed more than a classroom. It had unsettled entrenched power. The lawsuit triggered a formal inquiry from the United States Department of Education, DOE. Under Title V, the Office for Civil Rights opened a file on the Weldon County School District. The door, which had seemed locked for years, swung open. For Zion, it felt as though the burden he'd carried alone was now being shared by an institution armed with power and statute, and yet also fraught with political caution. Inside the Walker home, the energy changed. Gloria sat up later than normal, reading the legal memos forwarded by their attorney. Leonard paced in the kitchen, checking his phone every few minutes. Zion retreated into his notebook. It carried new annotations, whistleblower versus innovator. The family felt both gratitude and fear. They had chosen to speak. Now they faced consequences. Unexpectedly, Zion received an invitation to testify before Congress, the House Committee on Education and Labor. The letter was formal. You are invited to appear and provide testimony regarding policies for advanced placement access and equity for historically underserved students. Zion stared at it, breath caught. His mother placed her hand on his arm. "We'll prepare for this," she said softly. Zion nodded, his mind racing. The chance to speak at the national level was extraordinary, but the stakes were higher. He would step into the spotlight, not just as prodigy, but as witness. In the days leading up to the hearing, his inbox expanded with offers and instructions. One morning, an email arrived from a major educational think tank. "We would like to discuss a summer fellowship with you. Details forthcoming." Zion and his family exchanged glances. The proposal sounded positive, but Gloria, hardened by the earlier hollow offers, asked, "Is this another masked deal?" Zion considered the question. "Maybe. Or maybe this is the step we've been waiting for." Leonard added quietly, "Just remember why we're here." At school, the atmosphere felt charged. Teachers avoided eye contact. Students whispered. Sarah Jane approached Zion in the hallway, her voice low. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know how to speak up before." Zion nodded. Her apology felt like a small victory, but incomplete. He realized that naming the names changed who spoke and who listened. Crane withdrew from public classrooms. He canceled speaking engagements and left staff meetings prematurely. Rumors bubbled. He had submitted his own resignation. He was seeking a quiet teaching role elsewhere. Some said he was in therapy. In a university's math education forum, a former colleague of Crane's messaged, "I always knew the kids he didn't tolerate had better work than we accepted." The twist, Crane's reputation, built on discipline and legacy, now hinged on the very brilliance he suppressed. On the morning of the congressional hearing, the Walker household buzzed with reporters setting up cameras outside the driveway. A national broadcast news van sat across the street. Zion's father loaded the car with bags and a backpack. His mother rehearsed key points on her phone. Zion picked up his notebook for the last time before the drive. On the front page he had written in bold, "Truth Nail Acceptance." He closed it. "Ready," he said. The hearing room was vast and imposing. A row of microphones sat at the table. The nameplate in front of Zion read, "Mr. Zion Walker, student witness." He seated himself between his lawyer and Dr. Levins, flanked by his parents. The panel members on the dais watched. The press gallery behind recorded. The first question, "Mr. Walker, can you explain how you came to solve the problem in your class, and then developed a model which you'll now outline for the committee?" Zion adjusted his glasses, took a deep breath, and then gave his explanation precise, calm, and personal. He described the classroom, the isolation, the subtle dismissals, and how he began to translate that experience into a mathematical representation of bias and access. After several rounds of questions, a parliamentarian asked, "You've named individuals in your manifesto with allegations. Could you clarify your criteria for inclusion?" Zion paused. "I documented where the complaints were buried, where emails existed, where review never followed. I included names when evidence showed then administrator oversight." A murmur ran through the room. The ramifications were heavy. As the hearing moved into recess, Zion stepped into the hallway. A journalist asked, "Mr. Walker, what's your next step?" He looked at the camera, his voice steady. "I'm going to keep writing the equations that no one taught me, and I'm going to ask the right people to solve them with me." The journalist nodded, but Zion felt the weight behind the words. Walking back to the car, his mother asked, "You okay?" He nodded. "Better than okay. Ready." Leonard wrapped the side of the car. "Let them test it." Late that evening, once the hearing coverage faded, Zion received a private message from the think tank representative. "We would like you to join our research initiative. Start date July. Position: Junior Fellow, Innovation and Equity. We guarantee placement into our 2027 Leadership Fellowship. Compensation based on publication rights. Accept by midnight." The offer burst into the family's living room like a sudden spotlight. Gloria's heart raced. Leonard's face tightened. Zion stared at the words. The promise was real, but the condition was embedded. Based on publication rights. He closed his laptop and looked at his parents. "It's what we discussed." Gloria inhaled. "It's what we feared." Leonard exhaled. "It's both." The next morning dawned gray over the soybean fields. The horizon seemed uncomfortably wide. Zion walked out the front door carrying his notebook and a small suitcase. He stopped, looked back at the farmhouse, the barn, the stained door that once bore a threat. "We'll be all right," his mother said. He nodded. "We'll be more than all right." And somewhere in those quiet words, the storm was just beginning. Zion receives a mysterious offer to join a tech think tank that wants to recruit him at 13, but it comes with a catch. The morning sunlight spilled over the soybean fields once more, glinting through the farmhouse windows as if nothing had changed. But Zion Walker felt every inch of change. He stood in his bedroom, packed suitcase by the door, backpack heavy with notebook and laptop. But his mind was a storm of promise and caution. The offer lay in his inbox. Prestigious university scholarship, private schooling, mentorship, and money enough to secure a future most kids his age could only imagine. That afternoon he, his mother Gloria, and his father Leonard sat around the kitchen table. Gloria held a printed email from the think tank, offering full tuition, a generous stipend, housing, and the chance to join an elite cohort. But the offer carried a condition. Zion would have to sign a non-disclosure clause about his activism, drop public protest, and refrain from publishing or publicly speaking about his experiences. She slid the sheet across the table. "Read that," she said softly. Leonard read aloud, voice low. "As part of this fellowship, you commit to abstaining from public policy advocacy for the duration of the program." He looked up at Zion. "They want your brilliance, but they want your silence." Zion's hands trembled slightly. "They want everything I've earned, except the reason I earned it." Gloria's eyes glowed with pride and sadness. "You built this from back row math to national hearings. Don't trade it for comfort."
Leonard leaned back in his chair. "Think for yourself, son. No offer is beyond negotiation."
A heavy pause filled the room as gratitude, fear, hope, and defiance collided within them. That evening Zion visited his old classroom for the last time. The door opened with a familiar creak. Everything looked smaller now. The chalkboard, the desks, the faded posters about algebra rules. He walked to the back row where he had sat, back when he was invisible, and ran his fingers along the desk edge. Memories swirled. Mr. Crane's eyebrow raise, at his hand raising. The snickers, the doubt. He moved to the front, stood before the board where he had written that first impossible equation, the one no one else could solve. He touched the chalkboard and remembered those trembling moments of pride and fear. He recalled the silence that followed his solution, the accusation, the viral clip, the hearing. Here in this room, the truth had begun. He whispered to the empty classroom, "I didn't do this to be safe." The echo returned faintly, as if the walls themselves acknowledged him. Gloria and Leonard waited outside in the car. Leonard quietly said, "What did you feel in there?" Zion exhaled, "Everything I'm worth. and everything they don't value. Gloria reached for his hand. Then we won't let them price you too cheap. The next morning, Zion drafted his reply. He outlined his decision. I appreciate the offer, but I cannot sell my silence. Gloria reviewed it and nodded. That's the answer we hoped for. Leonard clasped Zion's shoulder. You are your own scholarship now. But the world kept moving. In the same week, the think tank followed up with urgency. Gloria watched his inbox as the message came. Final deadline. Accept by midnight, or the offer will be given to another candidate. The pressure sharpened. For Zion, it wasn't merely about opportunity. It was about integrity. He paused long enough to ask, what kind of opportunity silences the voice it claims to uplift? He deleted the email with the offer. Gloria and Leonard sat with him. Including his decision meant relinquishing immediate prestige and financial comfort. But they believed something else: freedom. Unexpectedly, that very afternoon, a letter arrived bearing the insignia of the prestigious Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. The envelope was typed. Formal. Zion opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, we are pleased to invite you to our Black Scholars Initiative program, selected by one of our alumni who has followed your case. His heart pounded. But below the congratulation sentence was a note. Program begins next fall. Except by June 1. Travel and living stipend provided. We believe in your voice, not just your work. The unexpected twist. This offer did not ask for silence. Instead, it recognized his story alongside his talent. Gloria gasped. Zion, this is what we were hoping for. Leonard leaned in. They want your voice too. Zion stared at the letter. The contradiction of the two offers clear. One sought to purchase his brilliance quietly. The other sought to amplify his truth. He zipped the letter into his backpack, slipped it next to his notebook with the manifesto inside. Across town, in the budget-tight hallways of his old school, word of Zion's decision had already traveled ahead of him. Teachers whispered in staff rooms. Some students gave him furtive nods in the hallway. Miss Grain passed his window in the classroom and stared at the empty chalkboard, as though it held a secret flame. The town seemed to breathe differently now. Where once neutrality stood, tension welled. Where once silence reigned, expectation stirred. The next morning, Zion walked past the vandalized barn, the faint smell of fresh paint, masking past threats. He touched the door, closed now, but forever changed, and thought, they can repaint the outside, but they can't erase the inside. In his notebook that day he wrote, genius doesn't carry a price tag, it carries a challenge. The question, who will we become, if we accept or reject it? Gloria found him writing. She read over his shoulder, then said quietly, you're changing what genius means for kids like you now. He looked at her. I hope it changes what schools mean. She smiled. And what the world thinks we should be. That evening, the MIT letter sat on the kitchen table, alongside Zion's manuscript. Incomplete but alive. Gloria served dinner under soft lamplight. Leonard talked about the land. Zion asked about the fields. They talked about roots and wings in the same breath. Gloria said, you're building wings without forgetting the roots. That's rare. Zion nodded. Because if I forget one, I'll fall. Leonard added, and the ground will catch you anyway. They all sat in the quiet, knowing that tomorrow would bring new decisions, new storm. But for tonight, they simply sat together. Despite the national media attention, the congressional hearing, the offers, the threats, Zion felt steadier than he ever had. Not because he had power, but because he knew his purpose. He wasn't just solving equations on a blackboard anymore. He was standing in a field that once taught him to keep quiet, demanding that the rules change. The offer from prestige and money had come with chains. Stay silent, don't speak. But the MIT letter came with permission. Speak, create, change. The difference felt like life, and the cost of refusing the first offer weighed anything but light. As Zion climbed into bed that night, his mind spun not with numbers but with meaning. The motors of history hummed beneath him. He thought of the chalk dust under his fingernails, of the barn door message, of the teacher's smirk. He thought of the fields at dawn, the hum of the cornrows, the promise of sun and soil. And somewhere between the farmhouse and the future, he made the decision. He would carry brilliance, not disguised, but declared. He would accept no deal that muted his voice, and he would step into the world on his own terms. Zion turns down the offer, then receives a letter from MIT's Black Scholars Initiative. written by someone unexpected. The mid-morning sun cast long shadows across the quad of Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Cambridge. As Zion Walker stepped out of the car with his parents, his backpack felt heavy, but not with papers. It carried something heavier purpose. Behind them, the small rural farmhouse where his story began seemed a world away, the soybean fields silent testament to roots and resolution. He inhaled the crisp air, the promise of tomorrow humming in the space between breaths. Inside the building, he walked through hallways of glass and steel, past windows showing labs where learners bent over machines and screens. People glanced at him, some with admiration, some with expectation, some with uncertainty. He thought of the classroom back in Weldon County, where he once sat at the back row, invisible, tapped on his desk with quiet rhythm, learned to believe numbers instead of words. That boy had changed. This institution, this stage, was for the next version. On the podium at the MIT Initiative launch, Zion addressed a crowd of faculty, students, donors, and young applicants from rural communities. "I wasn't supposed to be here," he began, voice steady. "I was told I'd fail. I was told I didn't belong, but I did the math anyway. And now what I want to create isn't a pipeline for one kid. It's a doorway for many." The applause came. His mother, Gloria Walker, wiped her eyes. His father, Leonard Walker, stared proudly. The land they worked faded behind his gaze. After the launch, Zion walked through a lounge, filled with students, some rural like him, others urban, elite, diverse. A young black girl from Mississippi said quietly, "Thank you for doing this. I thought I was alone." Zion nodded. "You're not," he said. "Not anymore." The moment felt fragile and strong at once. Meanwhile, back in Weldon County, the aftermath of Harlan Crane's fall was still settling. He had retired quietly, asked for no press conference, seemed to disappear from the math department he once governed. The town shifted. Teachers reconfigured seating charts. The whiteboard in room 3B bore a plaque now, "In honor of students who defy the limit." The change was slow but real. In classrooms across the state, Zion's story became part of the curriculum. The advanced placement teacher in Birmingham assigned his case study, Zion Walker and the Equation of Bias. Students debated how a single chalkboard moment had ripple effects. They asked, who gets told they can't? Who gets told they will? The parole of possibility had shifted. One evening, Zion sat in his MIT dorm room, notebook open, pages filled with symbols, not just calculus steps, but concept maps of scholarship and equity. He scribbled, "Legacy isn't the number of zeros in the offer, but the number of chances you hand forward." He thought of his first solution, the viral clip, the hearing, the summit, the manifesto, all unwound into this what next. Unexpectedly, he received an email from one of his rural scholarship program applicants, a 14-year-old girl in Nebraska, who had solved a problem he had set. She wrote, "You gave me the chance. Now I'll give one myself when I can." Zion paused. The equation of legacy now included variables he'd never expected. Other students, other futures, other fields. At a donors meeting that week, Gloria listened as the board discussed the financial plan for the scholarship fund. She raised her hand. "This isn't about the money," she said. Her voice carried the weight of fields and classrooms. "It's about honoring the students who are here. Unseen, unheard. If we honor only the visible ones, we keep burying the rest." The board quieted. Afterward, a donor approached her. "You're right," he said quietly. "We need to shift from charity to justice." Gloria nodded, but inside she thought, justice remembers. Zion's time at MIT expanded. He enrolled in undergraduate classes early, paired with graduate students, mentored by professors who once dismissed kids like him. One mentor, Dr. Marisol Chen, leaned over his work and said, "Your model here is not just elegant. It may reshape how we approach quantum systems." Zion looked startled. He hadn't told many people. "I'm just following what I see," he replied. Her nod said more than praise. "You belong here." The model he developed at age 13, first sketched in farmhouse lamplight, morphed into a research project. It proposed a new transformation in particle dynamics, a potential simplification of a complex physics problem. Classes took notice. Journal faculty asked for drafts. Zion felt something unfamiliar. Not the fear of being wrong, but the thrill of being possible. The path from farm kid to researcher was no longer metaphor. It was actual. Yet the biased world still hovered. In the lab lounge, a senior grad student remarked to another, "How did a middle schooler get here? He must have had insider support." The phrase stung. Zion heard it, but didn't respond. He walked away. The echo of doubt remained, but he carried something stronger: proof. In a ceremony at MIT, Zion received the inaugural Walker Rural STEM Scholars Award, named after his family and the program he had founded. He stood again at a podium, looked out at students from all backgrounds. "We don't need more trophies for the already noticed," he said. "We need seats at the table for the unseen. We need voices rather than silence." The audience stood. The applause was powerful, but Zion looked past it at the wide windows showing the campus beyond, and wondered about the fields where it started. In Weldon County, the scholarship program sent its first cohort back to town for a summer workshop. The soybean fields became a math camp, a place of promise. Parents gathered in the bleachers during the evening talk. "He built this," they whispered. Some looked proud, some looked uneasy. At home, Leonard worked less in the fields and more with the program's logistics: transportation, lodging, outreach. He admitted one evening, "When I started, I never thought he'd do this. But maybe I always hoped." Gloria placed her hand in his rough one. Hope is not naive when backed by action. Zion received an invite to present his research at a major physics conference. The honor was extraordinary. His parents watched the email them, faces alight. But when Zion tried to include mentorship of his scholarship students, the conference organizer said, "We'll cover airfare and talk time, but not student time." The moment reminded him again. Progress came with compromise. He revised his submission to include his students anyway. On a late night in the MIT library, Zion sat alone, chalk dust under his fingernails from the lab. Notebook open to a new frontier, a problem none of his peers had attempted. It involved a transformation of symmetry in multidimensional fields. As the pages filled, he thought of the barn door message: "Stop teaching that boy to think." The irony wasn't lost. In the Walker home, the barn now stood repainted, its board bearing new words: "Math is power. Power is free." A team of students gathered one evening, comparing notebooks, eating pizza, laughing about proofs. The house smelled like old ground and fresh promise. One Sunday afternoon, Zion returned to Weldon County for a talk at the local high school. He spoke to a gym full of students. He told them, "You don't need permission for your mind." Afterward, he walked through the school, visited the room where Crane once taught. The board was clean. He touched the edge. "I'm not angry," he said. "I'm intentional." The janitor nodded. "We've cleaned up, but we're still behind." Zion smiled. "Then let's catch up." The final twist came quietly. At a national education summit, a major foundation announced they would donate a fund to support rural Black STEM students. They cited the Walker program as inspiration. A photograph showed Gloria, Leonard, and Zion shaking hands. Her rugged dress, his work jacket, his suit. Legacy wasn't the handshake, it was the network that followed it. In his dorm room, Zion opened the newspaper on his desk. The headline read, "The Next Einstein." He stared at it, then at the complex equations he'd drawn in his notebook. They tangled across the page: spatial transforms, symmetry breaks, boundary conditions. His hand hovered over them. The farm boy who was ridiculed, the student who was threatened, the prodigy who became mentor. He now faced something bigger than the next accolade. Because legacy, he realized, isn't just about what you build, it's about what you leave undone for someone else. The cherry trees outside his dorm window bloomed faintly, a reminder that growth often comes in quiet moments. He leaned back and caught his father's final words: "The ground will catch you anyway." He looked at his notebook again. There were more pages to fill, more variables to resolve, more voices to amplify. And as the night deepened, Zion sat under the lamplight, chalk dust on his fingers, notebook open wide. The board ahead wasn't empty, just waiting. He whispered, "Let's begin." Zion's final scene ends with him scribbling equations under a headline: "The Next Einstein." If stories like Zion's moved you, don't let them go unheard. Like, share, and subscribe for more untold truths. Your voice helps echo theirs. Because brilliance often hides where no one's looking. Here's the question: who was your Mr. Crane? And did anyone believe in you when they didn't?